HOA member doesn't know the rules as well as he thinks. Obligatory on mobile, and while English is my first language, I suck at it. This story primarily take place between me and shitty neighbor who is a member of my community's HOA. Sorry if it's a bit long. As a bit of background, me and my 3 roommates moved into a housing community that is basically just a bunch of cookie-cutter townhomes. All of these homes have garages that open onto streets that wind through the community. This is important later, with your front door opening to a path on the other side of your house. There are also some free parking spots on the edge of the community where there are no houses. When we first moved in, we quickly found out that parking could be a bit of a pain during the day, especially when people had guests during the weekend. Now my roommates and I admittedly have more cars than the average family. Because we usually have to commute for work, we each have one. We try to make parking easier by using the garage, but we all have tons of sporting equipment, so we can usually only get one car in the garage. When all the parking in all the free spots is full, we just park our cars right up against the garage and leave them there during the day or overnight. We'd seen other neighbors do it, and it still left ample room for people driving on the street to get by. Well, one day shitty neighbor come up while my roommates and I are in the garage organizing some stuff and tells us that we can't park there overnight as it's against community rules. Before we had a chance to respond, he added, "And if you do it again, I will personally make sure you're towed." His first comment was pretty reasonable. We'd just moved in and didn't know that rule. But his second comment really just made him sound like an ass and wasn't necessary. One of my roommates simply responded that we didn't know as we'd just moved in and we wouldn't park there overnight anymore. Well, shitty neighbor, clearly trying to assert his dominance, responded with, "Good. You better not, because I'll be watching." Well, from then on we did follow those rules. If we parked in front of our garage during the day, we would make sure to move before we went to sleep. This worked out for a while until one fateful day. One of my roommates stopped by quickly after work to grab some dinner and clothes before heading to his girlfriend's. This was around 7 p.m., so he just parked up against the garage as it would be quicker than the parking spaces. Plus, it was early enough that he didn't think he'd get towed. Around 8 p.m. he went to head out and his car was gone. Guess who was there though? Shitty neighbor standing right outside. Immediately he said to my roommates, "Told you you were going to get towed if you parked here again." SN and my roommate argued for a bit before my roommate came back inside and calls the car lot. Well, it ends up they're closed, so he'll have to get his car in the morning. The kicker? They're going to charge him an overnight fee. All in all, it comes out to $500, which isn't a small amount of money for us. This neighbor has been an ass to us since we moved in, and even though it wasn't my car that was towed, I took this personally. To make sure we didn't get towed again, we decided to read the community rules, and lo and behold, we found out that the street in front of the garage is actually considered a fire lane and no one is supposed to park there at any point during the day. Between shitty neighbor treating us like shit and the fact that we could get him yelling at his wife every night. Not a big detail to the story, but just wanted to say to add to my point that this guy just sucked. I start to plan my revenge. Since quarantine started, I've been able to work from home and my desk conveniently looks out onto the street between the houses. This means that I can clearly see shitty neighbor's garage. I start to take notice of when he parks his car out in front of his garage. For about 2 weeks I noticed that he would come home around 1 p.m. and leave again at 2 p.m. On the third week I decided I would begin the revenge. On Monday, true to his schedule, he stopped by around 1. After about 10 minutes I gave the tow company a call and said that he was parked in the fire lane, and if they could come and remove his car. 20 minutes later a tow truck rolled up, hooked his car up, and towed it off. About 15 minutes later shitty neighbor came out and I could hear him start to yell back into his house, presumably at his wife. He then left and didn't come back until later that evening after he'd got in his car. Now it was funny to do this and I made sure to send snaps to my roommates who don't work from home. But I wasn't done yet. See, this jackass apparently didn't learn the first time because literally the next day he parks in front of his garage again. What do? Well, the exact same thing as the day before, of course. Again. SN come out, realizes his car is gone, yells at his wife and then goes to get it. Now after this time he is a bit smarter and parks in an actual spot before going in to get his lunch or whatever it is he does there midday. He does this for about 2 weeks before he decides that it's okay to park in front of his garage again. Well, who is still sitting at their desk every day and notices this immediately? Well, me, of course. And being the concerned resident that I am, I immediately call the tow company and off his car goes again. And again this is met with yelling. I wish that this had a more satisfying ending, but after this third time I decided I would stop. Because I genuinely felt bad for his wife, who he seemed to do most of the yelling at as if it was her fault that he was a dumbass. What I can tell you is that it definitely cost him over $1,000. If he hadn't gotten my roommate's car towed, then we wouldn't have ever found that fun little rule. The best part was that a number of my neighbors would have their cars parked there at the same time. And they'd never have their cars towed, which made it all the better when his was. We have had a number of other encounters that with him in the time since this happened, and I have another story that involves the actual HOA that I'll probably write later. That one is still ongoing though, so we'll see how it ends up. TLDR. Asshole neighbor gets my friend's car towed. So I get his towed 3 times. Edit. Removed initials and replaced them with shitty neighbor. Well done. Golf clap. I'd mail him the excerpt of the community rules, and if he parks in front of his garage again, get the car towed. You should cross-post this to our fuck HOA. I bet some folks there would get a kick out of it. You're much more reasonable than I. If some asshole had my car towed from my own property, I probably would be in prison. If the guy was an HOA board member, he probably had the HOA pay the fees to get his car back each time. We're all on mobile. No one gives a fuck. This is pretty good, man. I mean, if it said specifically, overnight, and you can prove that he called it to be towed and it hadn't been parked there overnight, then you might be able to get him in more trouble. Given it's supposed to be no parking from XY times and he had it removed outside of those times. Theoretically, you might be able to turn it around on him as theft or something like that. IDK about local laws where you live, but it might be an option. Keep us updated with shitty neighbor. Well done for beating him at his own game. I never understand why these people seek enemies. This is pro. Good job. I hate HOA. Just curious. I have heard about people parking on public property where they shouldn't and chaining their car to a tree or pole. A definite ass move, but what would happen if you did that in your own property? Would they cut the chain? Could you bill them for the chain? Could you prevent the tow truck from coming onto your rental property? I would argue that HOAs are there to protect members' property values, and everybody should be looking at the rules through that lens. That being said, they are no substitute for making friends with your neighbors. Not best friends, but friends enough to talk to about neighbor issues. Call the cops for a noise complaint next time he starts yelling at his wife.
If you enjoyed this video, please check out our playlists full of similar content. Epic Haircast is like doom scrolling for your ears. Please like, share, and subscribe.